In previous lessons and exercises, whenever we have referred to certain cells in a function, they have been relative cell references. This is why we have been able to fill down our formulas and allow the cell references to actually change to include the appropriate cells relevant to each row. So for instance, as you have seen previously, an exercise very similar to this, when we totaled the pay in each of the columns in this same row, we either added them or did the sum function. So for instance, here we're summing A8 to D8, and we're getting this value. And then when we fill down, you'll notice that it actually refers to A9 and D9. This is what we call a relative cell reference. As you move the formula from one cell to another, the cells referenced within that formula will actually move the same number of cells as your formula has. Since we moved this formula down one row from the initial input cell, the reference cells actually drop one row as well, and this allows us to fill all the way down. It's extremely useful. However, if we wanted to use a formula across multiple different cells, but we wanted one of the cell references to remain static, we would use what we call an absolute cell reference. So for instance, down here, if we wanted to multiply base pay times a pay multiplier to get a total pay for each person, when we inputted the formula here, we would refer to this cell and this cell. Yet when we fill down to here, we would want it to reference this cell, yet still the same pay multiplier cell. Now if we used relative cell references as we have in the past, for instance, we would end up saying this times this and get that correct answer, right? And if we actually drug this down one, we'd see that the cell reference, it would reference B23, but it would also reference B20, because the cell reference to the pay multiplier would also drop one row, because your formula dropped one row. So to keep this from happening, we would use what you call a static cell reference. So we want to reference B19, and to make it static, you use the money symbol. So the money symbol before the letter of the column keeps the column static from changing when you move your formula, and a money symbol before the row number keeps that from changing. So in this case, we would get 150, but when we drag this down, oh, whoops, I drug the entire cell. But when we fill this down, we actually see that this now references this cell, yet still this one to C, we reference this cell, yet still this one. So the left side of the multiplier, right here, remains relative because we don't have the money symbols, yet this remains static and does not change because of the money symbols. Now you could have the row remain static but not the column, or the column remain static but not the row, if you wanted certain parts of your formula to be able to remain relative and not others. Now continue to read about absolute versus relative cell references on the next two slides, and then practice these concepts in the next exercise.